All right, welcome back to our book review from Luigi's Bookshelf. This is chapter 5 of the book An American Sickness by Elisabeth Rosenthal. If you don't know what this series is about and you're coming in midstream, again, go back and watch 001 where I explain what the whole concept behind Luigi's Bookshelf and how it relates to Luigi Mangione. We'll try to always make sure that we keep an eye on what connection it has ultimately to the United Healthcare situation, Luigi Mangione, the alleged shooter of Brian Thompson's CEO of the United Healthcare. So we're going to get into this chapter. I find this is the fastest chapter we've read so far. We've covered each chapter has had a focus on the history of hospitals, insurance, doctors, and now we're moving on to medical devices. And so we're going to talk about that. There was a big portion of this chapter, which maybe leads to why it's going to be a little faster than previous chapters, that was about wire mesh or mesh that is inserted for vaginal walls and sphincters of men. I found the conversation a little dry. No pun intended. But we want to get into some of the details of other parts of the chapter. I think the ending part about the mesh and the sphincters and these things like that weren't as interesting as some of the earlier stuff, and I just didn't want to have to get in covering all the details of that. So it's not a bias towards it's not important to discuss women's health or men's health or anything like that. But let's focus on the parts that I have centered on, and it'll get done pretty quickly. So we're going to jump here to let's go to chapter 5. Gosh, that whole intro about vaginal walls and sphincters is going to get me in some trouble, isn't it? The age of medical devices. So I'm just going to read some. It's been a while. I read this days ago, and now I'm just doing it on a hot take because I want to keep us moving through the book. As you can see, we're about 30% through the book already at the beginning of this chapter. We'll be a little bit further when we get at the end of this chapter. And I want to keep moving this along. As an addition, by the way, I'm going to be producing, I think, later tonight, my first episode of The Devil's Briefcase, which is a new podcast. We're going to focus on Luigi Mangione and what I call the game theory in episode 1. So hopefully you'll stay tuned for that. I'll probably schedule that to be released tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock in the morning Pacific Standard Time. So anyways, this is going to be old news if you're coming into this book series late. So let's go ahead and grab these highlights and hope that I can remember on the highlights as we go, since it's been a couple days since I actually read this chapter. There's no such thing as a fixed price for procedures or tests, and the uninsured pay the highest prices of all. One of the things that's rule number 8. She brings these rules up throughout the book several times, but one of the things that we see all the time is there's no fixed price for anything in the entire medical industry. All the way from top to bottom, it's whatever the market can bear, whatever, and that's interpreted as whatever they can get away with. So if they can get away with charging more, they will. Whatever the market will bear, that's what it is. There's nothing that sets prices. There's nothing that sets a cap on how bad the medical system can get. And that's why it's out of control in part. Also, the theory that's going to run concurrent in this chapter, as it's run in all the other chapters before, is that the industry repeatedly finds workarounds every single time laws are put in place to try to curb the out of control spending and explosion of healthcare costs in America. They find a way to make it more profitable. So every attempt to fix the broken problem gets worse, which is why, bringing it back to Luigi Mangione, somebody feels that it might be justified. There could be people, not necessarily Luigi Mangione, but there could be people like those who marched on the headquarters of United Healthcare who feel that it's justified to fight back in some way because it's a matter of self-defense. These companies are taking advantage of everyone, and it's out of control, and Congress can't stop it. Politicians can't stop it. Half the congressmen and politicians are bought off by the health insurance industry. So even if you could find somebody with morals and scruples and principles to try to go after these people, every time they do attempt to do anything, the industry just finds a way to make more money off of it. And this has been the theme you should have been catching for every single chapter, and it's continuing on. I can't wait, by the way, till we get to the end of this, towards the end of this book, when we can start talking about this author's supposed how we can fight back suggestions, because we're hearing how bad the system is. I think most of us in America already know how bad it is, but what can we do to fight back? Short of doing something drastic like gunning down the CEO of United Healthcare in New York. So let's see what we can do. Now let's continue on with how bad the problem is with medical devices. You likely don't know the name of the catheter that delivered the wire mesh stent that went into your heart, or which company made it, and are even less likely to have any idea about its price. Yet, these prices of hardware are frequently the single biggest item on your medical bill, costing many thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars. So what they're basically pointing out is we're used to getting doctor's bills. We're used to paying a physician. We're used to paying a hospital fee or a whatever fee. But the hidden costs are how much it costs for the medical devices that you are being planted, the stents in your heart, the catheters, these kind of things. And those prices, no one knows who makes them and no one knows how much it costs. You just pay a bill. Okay, so that's what we're getting to here. Medical devices essentially have no real price at all. These pieces of sterilized equipment could rationally sell for a few $100s, but sometimes cost more than a small house. So basically, again, what they're saying is it's a hidden cost. Americans don't realize it costs them a fraction of what they charge you because nobody knows what it costs to make a catheter. Those pieces of plastic in a catheter may only cost, as they say here, a few $100s for them to manufacture, but they'll charge you something $15,000, $20,000 for it because you don't know what goes into making it. You don't realize how simple it is. Again, when I previewed earlier the whole mesh for vaginal walls, it was essentially related to basically fishing wire. So what amounts to basically fishing wire, they will charge you absurd amounts of money because you don't know what it really is. They could even use fancy terms if you wanted to ask what it is to make it sound like it's so high tech that you can't imagine. And the bottom line is it basically boils down to fishing wire. Each year, more people seem to get involved and each takes a commission or adds a markup as the device moves along the road from the factory into your body. The sales representative takes 16 to 18%. The distributor, 30%. The hospital then raises the charge by 100 to 300%, according to a doctor who owned a small private surgical hospital. And look at this. Look at this markup. So you have a device that's very cheap to make. Then your sales rep who sells it gets 20%. The distributor gets 30% on top of that. The hospital marks it up 300%. It's out of control, and nobody stops it because these things are hidden from us. We're not encouraged to ask how much does it really cost to make a catheter. We're not encouraged to ask, is that mesh that you're putting inside my body nothing more than fishing wire? Of course, you have to have somebody very skilled to put it in place, so it's not just like you can go buy fishing wire. But the point being is that we're not told the real cost of the items, and it's something they can just balloon out of control, and you won't have any control over or care. You'll just pay a bill because insurance, again, has lied to Americans and said, don't worry about what the cost is, we'll pay it, so you're covered. And we don't realize that there's a price to pay when the prices keep going up and up and up, and insurance has to cover it. It gets paid somewhere. Tax dollars, the uninsured. It's going to be made up somewhere. We just lie to ourselves acting like it doesn't matter. A defibrillator costs $40,000 even though it's just a battery and 2 wires and pads. So again, the simplistic nature of a defibrillator, the medical industry will make you sound like this is such a humongously complex piece of equipment when really, as they would kind of boil it down to, it's a battery, 2 wires, and some pads. There are dozens of large drug makers and hundreds of small ones. But only a handful of huge device manufacturers dominate the global market. Medtronic is the primary supplier of insulin pumps and, with St. Jude Medical and Boston Scientific, also of implantable defibrillators. These 3 behemoths are based in Minnesota and Massachusetts, which is likely why Al Franken, Amy Klobuchar, and Elizabeth Warren, some of our most liberal senators, have all worked across the aisle with Republicans to support the repeal of medical device excise tax, a 2.3% tax on all medical devices that was meant to finance the Affordable Care Act. So in other words, what they're basically saying is a long form of what I said, which is that politicians are in on the gag. They're in on making money. When we are told in America about our 2-party system, we are brainwashed in this country to fight each other over whether you're a liberal or a Republican or a conservative. We are taught to besmirch and sneer at another. Oh, you're one of those effing liberals, or oh, you're a right wing, whatever. You're a left wing this. You're a right wing this. We label people and then hate them because of a false system that has taught us to basically fight each other over ridiculous things, when in reality, people who make money, as they're pointing out, Al Franken, Amy Klobuchar, Elizabeth Warren, will reach across the aisle and work with Republicans when it comes to making money. So they're profiting. We know they're profiting. That's why they magically work together. But the rest of us, they'll keep fighting like it matters whether you're a Republican or a Democrat, whether you're a liberal, whether you're a conservative. That's all a sham. That's my soapbox. I'll try to get off of it now. I sniff a lot. No, I'm not doing drugs. I'm not doing cocaine. I just have an itchy nose. It's dry. It's winter. Bear with it. All right. Companies in the device industry spent $32.8 million on lobbying in 2014 to get rid of the tax. This is the medical device excise tax. So they were trying to get a tax to basically say your medical devices are out of control. Let's tax it, and we'll use some of that tax to bring down stuff using the Affordable Care Act. And all that happened was the medical industry, then device companies that made medical devices, spent $32.8 million lobbying Congress to get rid of that tax. Now, I ask you, if they can spend $32.8 million just lobbying, i.e. putting money in politicians' pockets to get time with them and say, hey, you need to repeal this tax. It's not doing good for America. You taxing our medical devices is not good for America. Let me take you out to dinner. Let me wine you and dine you. Let me give you some, sports tickets to a football game that you like. Let me bribe you here and there, lobbying you, so I can get time to say, hey, next time this vote comes up on this tax, you need to shut that shit down. It's costing us a lot of money. If they can afford $32.8 million bribing politicians and lobbying politicians to get rid of it, how much money are they really making? Because if they can spend $32.8 million, that means they're making a frick ton more than that, right? It's just logic would tell you that. It was so this lobbying effort, they listed, let's say, to get rid of the tax with top individual donations going to Senators Franken. We talked about Al Franken. $47,429 went to Al Franken. How about Amy Klobuchar? $39,000 went to Klobuchar. It was a success. Congress suspended the tax for 2 years in December 2015, saying that saving the industry an estimated $3.4 billion on revenues that are currently estimated to be in the range of $150 billion. So let's do the math. $32.8 million bribing senators, lobbying senators, $47,000 for Al Franken, $39 for Klobuchar, ultimately helped repeal that tax and saved them $3.4 billion in revenue. Just the numbers are astronomical. In an estimated industry of $150 billion, $32.8 million is a drop in the bucket. So it's money well spent for them to pay off senators and get those taxes repealed. To gain access to the market via the 51K route. Now, we've got to talk about the 51K route. So I think it's one of those things that I basically skipped over. I didn't highlight. I probably should have highlighted. Let me see if I can get my mouse over here. So basically what it boils down to was there's two, I believe this is how to word it. There are three classes of which medical devices fall into. Class 1, Class 2, and Class 3. Class 1 is simple devices like tongue depressors. Very, very simple. No complexity to it all. That's a Class 1 medical device. Pardon me. So a Class 3 would be those extremely risky things that require rigorous testing and whatever before they go into a human body. And studies have to be done to prove that they're safe and effective and all these different things. Class 2 is everything else. And what the industry just figured out how to do was basically take more and more items and just classify them as Class 2 in the everything else category, even when they are extremely difficult, life-threatening. If something goes wrong with that medical device, it's going to kill people and did kill people. But we're going to get it classified as a Class 2 because we're allowing our standards to slip so that it would save money, because it's an expensive process to get your device approved for Class 3. So if we can get more and more things classified as Class 2, which there is I believe this is the 510K route. Companies had to only claim that the new device was substantially equivalent to a product that already was sold in the United States and used for the same purpose. The program defined substantially equivalent in vague terms the device company lawyers could come to love and exploit. So in other words, what they did is they were able to get more and more complex medical devices just covered under it's substantially equivalent to something else, and therefore we don't have to go through testing, and it can be just part of the everything else category. Number 2, the 510K route of approval. Hope you followed that. It was obviously far more profitable to be in Class 2 and gain speedy approval through the 510K program than it was to be in Class 3, which required far more testing and red tape. In a court decision in the 1990s, it was revealed that investigators discovered the FDA spent about 20 hours evaluating 510K requests compared to 1,200 hours for a Class 3 device. According to another report, only about 8% of 510K applications were scrutinized by outside reviewers, and only a 10% contained clinical data. Suddenly, most of the applications were submitted as Class 2 products. So in other words, they were talking about the difference between spending, what would they say, 21 hours, 20 hours evaluating a 510 request, and then you're done, compared to 1,200 hours for your Class 3 device and a bunch of red tape. So they just found a way, they being the medical industry, the device makers, found a way to get more of their devices classified as substantially the same thing as something else, and we're just going to submit that complex, dangerous equipment in Class 2 because it saves everyone a bunch of time. The surprising result, this is the blue highlight now, the surprising result is that today there is generally far less scrutiny of new devices than of new drugs, even though most drugs can be stopped in an instant if problems emerge, and many devices are permanently implanted in the body. So again, let's hit that a little bit. So with a drug, if you find out it's got a bad side effect, you just stop taking the drug and hopefully you're okay. With a implant, a stent in the heart, you can't just pull that out if you found out that it's dangerous to you or that it could possibly cause death or is causing deaths. You can't just go rip it out. So it's far more dangerous, and yet it's getting to the point now where those medical devices implanted in your body are easier to pass than it is new drugs, which are easy to come off of if you need to. Many devices are not even tested in animals before, this is the yellow highlight. Many devices are not even tested in animals before they are placed into humans. In fact, there are often no clinical trials at all for devices. When claiming substantial equivalence, the quote, manufacturers don't have to prove that their Class 1 or Class 2 products are even safe and effective. So again, the FDA has allowed them to continue to abuse this and to put dangerous products on the market by just saying, hey, it's kind of like something else, and so just let us list it as Class 2 and move along. From 2005 to 2009, 70% of the high-risk device recalls involved products that had gone to market through the 510K program, that Class 2 area, said Dr. Deanna Zuckerman, a health researcher who testified at a hearing. Many of these devices should never have been in Class 2 at all, she said. So that's the problem. Another growing problem in this country, the constant abuse and finding ways to work around the system. So they have Class 3 for a reason, but they just found a workaround. We'll just find a way to make more things classified as Class 2, even though you have a Class 3 for dangerous stuff. So we're referring to a specific case here, and I'm kind of skipping ahead, yellow highlight. Her insurer wouldn't cover the device, but the hospital would lease it to her for $10,000. So this is this really expensive device, and the hospital wouldn't cover it. So her insurer wouldn't cover the device, but the hospital would lease it to her for $10,000. The doctor quoted a price of $7,000. She called the manufacturer, who proposed maybe $5,000. When she explained she couldn't afford it, that she only had $1,778 in her health savings account, the reply was, "We'll take it." And the bone never healed properly, and she was progressively lost half the strength in her hips. So in other words, what does this tell you about our industry when they come up with a ridiculous high number, and then they tell you, well, you know what, we'll do it for $10,000, and then she negotiates. Okay, well, we'll do it for $7,000, and then she negotiates. Okay, we'll do it for $5,000, and then she's like, man, all I have is $1,700. Good enough. How shitty is that device? Sorry to shout. How shitty. I've been working on the shouting thing. It's not going as well as I would like, but I'm getting better. But anyways, that's how bad this system is. If you can negotiate a $10,000 plus bill down to $1,000 because that's all you have, and they're just like, yeah, okay, $1,000's good. I mean, because really it doesn't cost probably more than $500. So $1,000's great. $10,000 would have been better. She was surprised when, during an office visit, the doctor handed her a printed letter. So this is, okay, so this, I should probably read this first paragraph that I didn't highlight. In the months that followed, the fracture healed slowly. Things seemed to be on the mend. And so she was surprised when, during an office visit, the doctor handed her a printed letter with an ominous warning about the device that was placed in her hip, the one repaired half a decade before. It read, "The purpose of this letter is to reinforce our recommendation to you for continuing close follow-up and of your hip replacement. Some recent design innovations in hip replacement implants have led to increasing concerns about the potential for adverse reactions. So Mrs. Baxter-Stryker Rejuvenate implant is not mentioned by name, nor does the letter mention that the Stryker Rejuvenate. So Miss Baxter Stryker's Rejuvenate implant was not named, and it didn't mention that Stryker Rejuvenate had been recalled 6 months earlier, which Miss Baxter only later discovered on Google. The company was under no legal obligation to notify patients. The letter, she noted, does not even say that we're sorry. I know that I read that super sloppy, so let me try to reaffirm what it's basically saying. Basically, the company that had a recall on the medical device implanted on her, saying it was unsafe or potentially unsafe, didn't even let her know, didn't apologize for putting something in her body that was unsafe, and she only found out about it being recalled 6 months prior to this warning that, hey, you should just monitor it, like really soft language, you should monitor that implant. She had to go out on Google and find out that it had been recalled, the product had been recalled. Did anybody reach out to her to tell her that the item in her body had been recalled? No. Did they offer an apology? No. That's the way things go. All right. We're moving on several pages to the next highlight. In recent years, hospitals have been fighting back against the industry, suddenly demanding that device reps, like lobbyists, be registered and get permission each time they enter the premises. But the only thing this effort to limit the influence of money has led to is yet another business opportunity, which seems to define the cycle of life in medicine. In other words, every single time so the hospitals are like, okay, if you're going to sell us medical devices and you're going to come into hospitals and you're going to try to lobby congressmen, you're going to try to lobby our hospital workers that we should start using your medical devices, and you're spending money having sales reps come into our hospital and try to get us to sell your things. We want to curb that, and we want you to get permission before you enter our premises and try to start selling things. Then they found a way to make that profitable for them. As an aside, I want to tell you something. There's a TV show that my wife and I have started to watch. I don't know if you've seen it, but I swear to God, I shouldn't use that word. I swear this TV show must have been written based on this show. I was going to do a little search on Google and I didn't do it, on when the TV show called The Resident, which is about hospitals. So it's about, in specific, it's about a resident in training at a hospital, if you will, who the whole show is about the corruption of the health insurance industry. And it talks about these things. It shows medical device manufacturers coming in and trying to pressure doctors to buy devices and whining and dining them and giving them free lunches and all these different things to try to persuade the hospital to buy some new fangled medical device, and how sleazy the whole process is. And that show, The Resident, is disgusting with what they show, the level of corruption that they show. Now, it's a fictionalized show, and there was times when I was watching this show with my wife, and I realize I'm going on a digression, but I want to share this with you. There was times when I said to my wife, it can't be that bad. Like, I think they're just really taking this to the nth degree, because it really can't be as bad as this show is making it. This seems ridiculous. They were showing, for example, low-level residents who don't have as much training performing complex seizures in the operating room. Guess what? We talked about that in a previous chapter, how hospitals will use residents because they're a fraction of the cost of the OR surgeon, and that residents are performing surgeries that are way beyond their capabilities, or at least pushing the limits of their capabilities, and they're terrified they're going to make a mistake and kill somebody. And that was in this book. That was in this book that we read. And this TV show, The Resident, shows those things. And at the time I was saying to my wife, like, it can't be that way. It can't be. They're stretching this. It's almost as if The Resident was a TV show made about this book. So many things that come up in this book, the topics that are in this book, is shown in The Resident. It makes you sick to your stomach. Maybe they do stretch things quite a bit. I bet you if somebody works in the medical profession, they'll say it's not quite as bad. But you should watch it. I encourage you to watch The Resident. It makes me at times want to puke to realize that it's a lot closer to reality based on this book than you want to believe. It is a lot closer to reality than you want to believe. And that movie, that fictionalized TV show, which has some good actors, really good actors. I highly recommend you watching The Resident. It's very, very eye-opening, if you will, and practically a fictionalized account of this book that we've been reading. All right. So you see, I skipped through a whole bunch, and that's it. A lot of that last part of the chapter was indeed about the mesh devices and for reconstructing vaginal walls, for sphincters for men, and basically they were saying that these devices were killing people. They would put stuff in, they would get infections, it would cause all kinds of complications, and they're simple things. Super simple and cheap to manufacture, but cause all kinds of medical complications. Listed as type 2, class 2, to get faster approval and through the system, but literally killing people. So It was a relatively short chapter compared to other chapters, so also the author didn't spend as much time on that chapter as we are not going to spend as much time on that chapter. It's just one of those additional eye-opening things. As you can see, chapter 6 will be coming up sometime, hopefully soon, the age of testing and ancillary services. I want to say a couple of more things again. Watch The Resident if you're interested in that. Watch the movie Sicko by Michael Moore. I haven't seen it for a long time. I saw it when it first came out, I think a long time ago. Someone just recently told me that they watched Sicko because it was recommended supposedly by Luigi Mangione in a reference that may or may not have been from him, but they watched it nonetheless and they were shocked and appalled. So again, if you want to go a little faster than a book review, consider watching Sicko, which is pretty outdated at this point, but it would shed light on things. Watch the fictionalized The Resident and get ready to have a bag near you so that you can puke when you realize how bad the system really is and how corrupt things are. We're a couple of seasons in, I think. Maybe, yeah, we're on the second season, and it's bad. It's brutal. So again, thank you for sticking with us. I just want to do one reminder that in this series, we may be a little on hold. This may be the last one you get for a couple weeks because my wife and I are heading to a family reunion in Las Vegas. I will be recording those family reunions. It's the first time my wife's going to meet some sisters of hers that she's just discovered recently. We're going to go meet them for the first time. I'm going to record it, and I'm going to have that on a unlisted playlist on YouTube that I talked about. So if you want to get involved in that and join us on our trip to Vegas, which is outside of Luigi Mangione's purview, outside of this book purview, but you want to know us a little bit better as human beings and share in that moment, then I encourage you to ask for the link, and I'll give you a link to that unpublished thing. But we're going to be down in Vegas next week. So this time next week, we will actually be in Vegas for 5 days, and then we'll be back. So don't expect any new chapters to be reviewed until I get back from that trip and get settled in. Also, like I said, I'm going to try to publish our first episode of The Devil's Briefcase, a new podcast, vidcast, whatever you want to call it, where we're going to focus on episode 1, the game theory about Luigi Mangione. So again, thank you so much for taking part. Thank you for those who are letting me know on a continual basis that you're still reading and that you're still with me and that you find this beneficial. That's what drives me to continue doing it, is knowing that there's still people who are listening. We're 35% through the book. Let's continue to get through this and finish this series up on this book, and have a good day.